I know I drift in my conversation between the expression violence, but I think that and immediacy. I think immediacy is a better one than violence, because violence has all sorts of implications which immediacy doesn't give, because immediacy is just about the immediate object there before you. But then you must never forget that every object has its passions. It has its implications, no matter who they are. If I could record you 5 people in this room, how could I do it? I could illustrate you, and what good would that be? But how can I make the immediacy and the different suggestion by your very contours, by the difference in your faces, by the difference in your shapes? How can I make those things with, you may say, I have to use the word violence that you have here, within the studio, in this enclosed space. 5 living people. How could I make this thing? I could illustrate it, and that would say nothing. But how can I find, how will accident work for me so that I can record you?
Why do you want to record us?
Because after all, life, we have the short moment of existence.
It's a way of making it permanent, in other words.
It's a way, as they talk about Proust, of crystallizing time and of crystallizing the moment of one's existence, and that's all one has. Why one wants to do this, you may say, is a mystery. Because we shan't ever know whether we've done it, and perhaps it's a way of passing the time. I think that there's a whole area of forms which are organic. A form that relates to the human image, but is a complete distortion of it. Of those pictures were done of somebody who was always in a state of unease. You are working on all sorts of very private feelings about behavior and about the way life is. At that moment, I'm thinking of nothing but how hopeless and impossible this thing is to achieve. And by making these marks about which I don't know how they will behave, suddenly there comes something which your instinct seizes on as being for a moment the thing by which it could begin to develop. I've always been very moved by the movements of the mouth and the shape of the mouth and the teeth, and I like you may say, the glitter and colour that comes from the mouth, and I've always hoped, in a sense, to be able to paint the mouth like Monet painted a sunset, but I've never succeeded in doing it. But I was also very influenced by the Eisenstein film, the Potemkin, and the Odessa sequence, in which is this wonderful shot of the nurse screaming. And also, when I first went to Paris, I found in an old bookshop a book on diseases of the mouth, which was beautifully coloured, hand-coloured. The plates were hand-coloured, and that it had a tremendous effect on me. And I don't know if this obsession when I was much younger with the mouth has a lot of sexual implications, as people say it may have, and I believe psychologically it is supposed to. But anyhow, whatever it was, I was at that time very obsessed by that image.
So you might well have been interested in painting open mouths and teeth, even if you hadn't been painting the screen.
I think I might.
Nevertheless, you did become involved with painting the human screen.
I did, and I've always hoped, I've always wanted and never succeeded in also painting the smile, but I have never been able to do it.
Actually, in your work as a whole, there are relatively few paintings that have ostensible subjects which might be called horrific, and most of them are fairly straight subjects of figures seated in rooms and so on, and yet people have a sense that your work as a whole is horrific. Why do you think this might be?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, you may say the carcasses of meat. It's true that when you go into a butcher's shop, you see the beauty of the meat. how beautiful meat can be. But if you, when you think about it, also you can think of the whole horror of life, of one thing living off another, and the natural pattern of life, and the natural sequence of life. I mean, it's why when all these stupid things about bullfighting, because if you go, people will eat meat and then complain about bullfighting. The thing is so mad. They will go in and complain about bullfighting covered with furs and birds in their hair. I mean, it's so illogical.
But yet people's sense of your work as being horrific is not really justified by the ostensible subject matter. Why do you think they have this feeling that it is?
Well, the thing is, I've always hoped to put over things as directly and rawly as I possibly can, and perhaps if a thing comes across directly, they feel that is horrific.
Yes,
because if you say something, even if you say something very directly to somebody about something, they are sometimes offended, although it is a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Because people tend to be offended by facts, or what used to be called truth.
Let us say that you have a model, somebody you have already painted many times from memory.
Yes.
Have you ever had such a person sitting for you?
Yes.
And what has happened?
They inhibit me. They inhibit me because one of the things is I would, if I like them, I don't want to practice the injury that I do to them in my work before them, if I like them. I would rather practice the injury in private, by which I think I can record the fact of them more clearly.
In what sense do you conceive it as an injury?
Well, because people nearly always believe that the distortions of them are an injury to them, no matter how much they feel for or how much they like you, they do nevertheless, as most of them are not people who are concerned with art, feel the distortions are forms of injury.
Don't you think their instinct is probably right?
Possibly.
Do you not think that when you talk about recording different levels, among other things you may be doing, is precisely expressing at one and the same time a love of the person being painted and a hostility towards them, and that the marks you are making are both a caress and a blow, an assault?
I think that this thing is how, I think it goes to a deeper thing than this. I think is how do I feel, and this can only be feeling, how can I make this image more immediately real to myself? That's all.
Could you not be making it more immediately real by summing up at one and the same time contradictory feelings towards what you're painting? That would be making it very real, I would have thought.
Well, I think that then you would be going into psychological ways of, of seeing. And I don't think that most painters do. I think most painters are actually, at any rate today, are attempting to bring over the image that they want to record as strongly and as immediately as possible onto the nervous system, and it is not actually as involved, although it may be subconsciously involved with what you say, but I don't think it's consciously involved at all.
If it was consciously involved, the result would be disastrous. But don't you think, and this is why I say that your sitter instinctively sees this as an injury, which in a sense might be thought naive, but I'm suggesting that the sitter's instinct is right.
It may be
in
right.
realizing what's really going on.
What you're really saying is that what Wilde said, you kill the thing you love.
In the paintings of men in rooms, there's somehow, people feel there's a sense of claustrophobia and unease there, Are you aware of this yourself?
Well, I'm not aware of it, but the thing is that most of those pictures were done of somebody who was always in a state of unease. And whether that has been conveyed through these pictures, I don't know. But I suppose in attempting to trap this image, that, and as this man was very neurotic and very almost hysterical, that may possibly have come across in the paintings.
It's interesting that people want to read meanings into your pictures as if they were problem pictures or narrative pictures of some sort.
But one wants to read. People like to get a meaning from everything.
But they want to get a sort of story, don't they? Or to see the pictures as a kind of comment.
They do,
on
yes.
society.
They do.
Is it ever intended to be that?
No.
When you do paintings, say, of nudes in rooms,
Yes.
male nudes,
Yes.
sprawling across sofas or anything,
Yes.
do you have in mind someone else, or do you sometimes think of them as yourself?
No, I think of them not as of myself. I think of them. Some of those things have come from photographs that I have, and some of them have come from the Muybridge book of the human body and movement, which I have very often used figures from. But I don't think of them as myself. But it's true to say that, of course, that when you paint anything, you are the same. You are also painting not only the subject, but you are painting yourself as well as the object that you're trying to record, because painting is a double, is a dual performance. Because, for instance, if you look at a Rembrandt painting, you know, I feel I know very much more about Rembrandt than I do about the sitter.
So in the first place, so you use existing photographs that you've come across, like
Yes.
those in Muybridge.
Yes.
And then you use photographs like this, which you've had taken in order to paint from,
Yes.
instead of getting a model to come and pose.
I have, yes. In fact, even from friends who will come and pose, I've had their photographs taken for portraits, because I very much prefer working
From the photographs.
from
and
the
them.
photograph than from them.
But then you've also used photographs of works of art.
Well, I have, and I think most unsuccessfully, because I think it's already so remarkable that there's absolutely really nothing to do about it, but I used it out of obsession. I don't think that any of these things that I have done from other paintings actually have ever worked.
In spite of the terrific importance that you give to the paint itself in an artist like Velázquez and Rembrandt, you paint again and again from photographs. I mean, when you were in Rome, you went to see the Velázquez, the Innocent.
No, I didn't.
You never went?
No.
How long were you there?
I was in Rome for about 2 months.
And you never actually went to see this painting which you'd been working
I didn't.
after for years?
No. It's true to say that at that time I was extremely unhappy emotionally, and I loathed churches, but I spent most of my time in St. Peter's, just wandering around. But I think another thing was probably a fear of seeing the reality of the Velázquez after my tampering with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was probably a feeling of seeing this marvelous paint, at least what I'd always thought as a marvelous painting in photographs, and then seeing the stupid things that one had done with it.
You've also got a lot of things around here of your own, I mean, reproductions of your own work. Do you look at them while you're working?
Well, I do very, very often. I very often think that I will be able to, for instance, I've been trying in this particular one to make this image which I did in 1952, and I've been trying to make this into a mirror, so that this image is crouched before a mirror of itself. It hasn't come off, but I very often find I can work from photographs of my own things that have been done years before, and they become very suggestive.